Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Saratoga Report podcast. Today, our guest is going to be Joe Migliore, bloodstock agent with a new position that we're going to be getting into in just a minute. There are really three things that I think we're going to talk about today, and then I'll introduce Joe. One is the Adelphi Racing Club and Joe's new position there. The second thing is the upcoming New York bred sale and what the process is for buying a horse at that sale. Joe's going to actually try and do that, something he's done before, but he's going to try and come up with two or three, at least if he can, horses for Adelphi or possibly also for private clients. And then the third thing is with the Curlin Stakes today, the Haskell tomorrow, the Jim Dandy coming up a week from tomorrow, and then also the Travers coming up in late August. The 3-year-old picture is really getting interesting. And I'm going to ask Joe to predict who the Eclipse Award winner will be by January of 2025 as a 3-year-old colt. A tough assignment for Joe there. But Joe has been a sales associate for West Point Thoroughbreds. I did that for about 6 years. Then he left to start his own bloodstock agency in 2021. He then added some responsibilities as a jockey agent, and he currently represents Katie Davis. But recently, and it's what we want to talk about today, he joined the Adelphi Racing Club as head of racing and partnership operations. So, Joe, after all that, welcome to the podcast. And let's start with what can you tell us about Adelphi, the racing club, and then also about specifically what you're going to be doing for them.
Absolutely. And happy to be back on, John, and good to see you and always love coming on the pod. Thanks for having me on. So the Adelphi Racing Club for me is an incredibly exciting, partnership that has kind of burst onto the scene over the last 2 to 3 years here. I got connected to Matt Kater maybe 4 or 5 years ago through some close friends at the track, and got to know Matt very well. Matt was at the time owning horses on his own under Kater Racing, and over the course of our friendship developing, he was kind of beginning to pick my brain on the partnership aspect, knowing that I had that background at West Point Thoroughbreds and always had a deep affection for my time at West Point and the job that they do. It's an incredible group. And I think we all see this shift in the ownership, model, if you will, within the industry that, it used to be one individual owning 40 horses. And now it seems like it's 40 horses, 40 individuals owning one horse. And really the camaraderie and the element of friendship that you find with, any partnership where multiple people own one horse and that horse is a successful horse or an exciting horse, or even if the horse is just okay. There's moments in the paddock and the winner's circle and days at the races where, you're with like-minded people and with friends. It's far more enjoyable than kind of going it on your own. And I've owned a horse or two on my own, and a little bit lonely when it's just, yourself standing there in the winner's circle and, you need people to share it with. And when Matt began Adelphi, he initially had, asked me if I wanted to come on. And at the time I was really focusing on beginning my bloodstock business. So kind of came on as just his bloodstock agent at the time and just buying the horses for Adelphi. But then obviously following them closely through their careers and coming out to the races on days that they would run. And for me, there was something different about Adelphi that just really, caught my attention. And it's just such a close-knit, like-minded group of people that are always having an incredible time at the races. There's something special about what is building there. And that is also kind of proven in how quickly they've grown. It started very small as just Matt and some close friends. And, now it's expanded quite rapidly over the last 2 to 3 years. And I don't think we're looking to get too big because we do kind of like that intimate feel to it. But we are going to grow a little bit. And I'm happy to now come on in a more full-time role with the team as kind of the also the racing manager, as well as, head of partnership operations. And it's really just about bringing good people into the group, giving them as much of a chance to have success at as fair of a price as we can. And then continuing to host events and different educational things that are going to teach people about ownership and have them, really get the best education they can into owning horses, and in the fairest possible way. And, another thing that I really like what Matt does is that, Matt remains involved himself as an owner for a large portion of every single horse in the partnership. So, we are just as invested as the owners that come in and buy shares. And, we're all looking to succeed, and we're all looking to have a good time while we're doing it. And so far, a lot of that's happened, and hope that you'll see a whole lot more from Adelphi in the coming years here.
How many horses does Adelphi have in training now?
At the moment, that number is right around 20. And that has kind of grown from 2 or 3 horses at the start just 3 years ago. We've made more starts every year. We've won more races every year. The win percentage is always in and around 20%, which is where we want to be.
Yeah.
And I think that you'll see as we approach our, the yearling sales portion of the year that we're looking to add to the roster, not only with yearlings, but also with, private purchases or horses of racing age. We actually purchased one this week in a stakes winner in Otello, who we're excited about. He's probably going to get a little bit of a freshening, but a horse that will begin, campaigning for us in the fall. Mm-hmm. So we're looking for action at every level, and excited about the yearling sales season to come. It's really a big goal for us to have a strong 2-year-old class next year, and it will probably end up being our biggest 2-year-old class to date for 2025. So there's a lot of exciting things ahead in the future, and we're ready to dive into this yearling sales season now, with kind of our first one that we're focusing on being the New York bred sale up in Saratoga.
Joe, you have as part of your title head of racing operations. So I guess to me that means you're the interface between Adelphi and the trainers. And so you'll be speaking with them on a regular basis. Can you just talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So in that role, I think it's exactly what you said. It's, getting weekly updates from the trainers. Look, I'm a guy who spends a lot of mornings on the backside as it is anyway, in relation to my role as a jocks agent for Katie. So being out there on a regular basis gives me a good chance to watch our horses train, even if it's not a breeze day, it's maybe just a gallop day, and kind of continually seeing how those horses are doing. Obviously, we have implicit trust in all of our trainers that we send horses to, but I think what a lot of our partners, the feedback they've given us that they really love about Adelphi is how much communication we provide, how clear and concise that communication is. And then also on top of that, while I'm getting those updates, I'm also getting a lot of content on horses training in the morning. When I have time, being able to film works, film horses galloping, even just get things as simple as photos of a horse on the wash track. And I think with us, you'll find that, our weekly updates are as chock full of those things as they can possibly be. And, I think sometimes people in other groups can feel like, oh, maybe I just got a one line on every other week on what my horse is doing. And it kind of feels the same. We're really I'm trying to relay all of the information I get almost word for word and as detailed as I can make it. And I think that keeps people feeling more involved in the process of the build up to their horses' races.
Joe, in a couple of weeks, we've got the Fasig-Tipton New York bred yearling sale coming up. I've been looking at the catalog online. There are 300 horses in that sale. You hope to end up with 2 or 3. Let's guess. How do you get started in getting the list down to a manageable number that you'd be interested in buying?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, myself on a personal level, I don't like to do any kind of shortlisting based off of pedigree. I'm much more interested in seeing the physical horse in front of me and then working in the information I see on the pedigree page afterwards. So it is my goal to look at nearly every horse in that sale. The very initial first look shortlisting process, I will split up with a close friend of mine, where I will look at probably half the barns and they will look at the other half of the barns, and then we will compare notes. But that first initial looking process is, I'm not looking for reasons necessarily to pick horses apart or take them off the list. It's more, is there enough of a body there to keep this horse on? And it's more of a quick look as opposed to a detailed, focused look at the horse. So you're really trying to get that number of 300 after the first day of looking down to, say, 100 or so. Maybe you get it down to like a third of the sale remaining. And then for second looks, really focusing in on what you see with the individual. And then probably trying to get that number again down to 40 or 50 or so. And then that's when the pedigree analysis and the possible previous sales history analysis of a horse. Maybe a horse is a pinhook from, was purchased as a weanling for X amount of dollars. And that's when you start to add that information in. And once you get the list down to about 20 to 25 horses in that sale, is when, I'll be shooting that list out to clients and then, trying to match up clients with specifically what they're looking for. Some people might call me and say, I'd like a filly in this price range, or I'd like a filly that's by an established sire as opposed to a newer sire or an unproven sire. And once you've kind of narrowed down the list based on the individuals that you prefer, then you can kind of speak to clients and analyze the list and, put the right horse in front of the right person, so to say, and work it from there. The final stage of the entire process is vetting, and deciding what horses you do intend to bid on. Then you'll have a vet, take a look at the repositories with the sales company and also do a scope of the yearling. And that will eliminate some horses from the process as well. You hope it doesn't, but there's always going to be certain horses that the vets have concerns or issues with. And the vetting as well is more of a levels of risk thing. I think people have it in their mind as like it's a pass-fail system. It's not how I like to work with my veterinarians. I think it's more of a, okay, well, if there is this issue, what is the level of concern or level of risk with that issue? What can happen over time in relation to this issue that I see? And then it's about finding clients that either have a high stomach, have a stomach for a higher degree of risk versus a lower degree. And then also sometimes if there is a minor risk, it could help you on the price point end of the equation as well. And then once you get your horses that get by the vet, then you are looking to assign, a value range that you think the horse would be fairly bought at. And some of them you'll walk up to the ring and they'll fly over that range and say, well, it was a nice horse and good luck to who's willing to pay that. Or some of them you'll be signing the ticket on. So we're hoping to have a strong New York bred sale. We've had a lot of success with New York breds in recent history with Adelphi. Funny How was a stakes winner for us and graded stakes place filly that was a New York bred we bought. And then also most recently and most excitingly, maybe we have Pandagate, who's a 3-year-old that just won the New York Derby this past week, and we had an absolute blast out there traveling out to Finger Lakes and back. Yep. So we're always in the market for good New York breds. I think a lot of our partners are East Coast based or Northeast based, and that New York bred program with all of its conditions and incentives is of great focus to us.
Congratulations on Pandagate. I followed that with a lot of interest. You hear the word confirmation a lot on the sales grounds, which means how's the horse put together. Are there certain flaws? I mean, none of them are perfect, but are there certain flaws that you just can't accept? I hear people say, well, if the horse has long cannon bones, that's something I just don't like. Back at the knee, the horse that's offset at the knee. Is there something for you in particular that you just can't put up with?
I try to more so take everything you see and shape it into the entire piece of the horse, right? So, there's certain issues that maybe I can live with a horse if it's a more lighter framed horse versus if it's more, heavier framed horse or a horse that carries a lot of weight, like a horse that's very upright through their pasterns and they're a heavier bodied kind of individual. For me, that just screams a horse that's going to struggle to stay sound. Whereas maybe if the horse is a little bit, more lighter framed, maybe it's not as much of an issue. Things like you said, long cannon bones or a lengthier horse. It's, well, am I looking at a horse who is supposed to be a dirt sprinter and he's big and long and slightly awkward looking, or is it a horse that maybe the pedigree says is supposed to be some sort of turf marathoner? So it's really about getting a sense for, the horse's conformation, and then does it align with what the pedigree says this horse is kind of supposed to look like? And sometimes there's also specific sires that pass on specific conformational traits where generally in a horse I would say, oh, well, that horse is very long in its back, or that horse has a poor hind leg. But if I know that sire kind of throws that type of horse a lot and they still perform, it's something that you have to, factor into the equation as well. So I never like to make cut and dry, I don't do this kind of statements, because it depends on the situation. It depends on the horse you're looking at, and also what your intentions with that horse are. I mean, there's horses that maybe pin hookers that are going to the 2-year-old sales will look at and say, well, I cannot have that because I have to make this horse breeze a furlong in April in 10 seconds. Whereas I'm saying, well, I can wait till they're a 3-year-old and they're going to run a mile and a half on the turf or something. So it all depends on the situation, the client, what they want, and then just trying to make sound decisions with the full picture of what you're looking at.
When you're on the sales grounds and you approach a consignor, they bring the horse out and you're going to ask them to walk the horse. What do you look for in that walk, and how important is it to you in the overall decision as to whether to buy that horse?
You're looking for a horse that moves athletically and moves fluidly, right? If you're looking at any kind of horse that's kind of maybe very a stabby walking kind of horse, or just a horse that doesn't carry themselves with much athleticism, look, it's very difficult because they're just walking back and forth, right? It's not like the 2-year-old sales where you're actually going to get to see them breeze at full speed on the track and truly get a sense of what their action is going to look like. You're kind of forecasting that in just how they carry themselves and how they move, while being walked on the shank. Obviously, we all want to see a very fluid moving horse that, has a big overstep and puts their head down and just seems to float, right across the ground. And then there's times too that, if I'm looking at a very maybe powerfully built horse that's indicating that, from the pedigree as well, maybe they're supposed to be a dirt sprinter. Sometimes I'm a little more forgiving of the walk because, that's not necessarily a horse that, the strength of the horse is going to be their explosive speed and power, as opposed to, it's not a beauty contest walking on the shank. But if I'm looking at a turf horse that wants to go a route of ground, or any horse that wants to go a route of ground, I want to see them move athletically, and what appears to be a horse that, will, when they are broken and start galloping on the track, is going to have a big, kind of long stride and extension and reach to them.
Sometimes when you see a horse walk, the horse might act up a little bit. They don't walk perfectly. They start to get fractious and jump around. Is that something that bothers you because you think they're always going to be like that? Or is that something that you think you can correct in time, and the horse's mind is something that you can work on? Or maybe it's late in the day and the horse is tired. What about that, Joe?
So I'm never going to take that kind of horse that gives me a poor show off on one look. If I see, while they're standing there, physical features that I enjoy or that I like, but then they're acting up, or they're not focused, or just for some reason or another, maybe they just don't walk well that first time I see them, but I like the physical horse that's standing in front of me, I will mark that horse down to look at again. And if I come back and it's the same situation, then maybe it's something I'll start to factor in. But I think you can be a little too quick to judge if you're just knocking them off because something spooked the horse that you didn't notice spooked the horse, or maybe something was happening just before you arrived. Another horse got loose and all the horses there are a little riled up at the moment. So I try to be forgiving. And then also, those end of the day ones, like you said as well, they can, it's going to be hot. It's going to be summertime. They've walked back and forth 200 times that day. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, 4 in the afternoon. That's a horse I'll probably mark down to say, hey, come back and look at him tomorrow morning at 9:30 in the morning or 9 in the morning, and try to see how they're carrying themselves then. I think we're all looking for maybe too many reasons to pick them apart at times, and I'd rather give them as much of a chance to show me something as they can.
Yeah.
Look, if I look at a horse 2-3 times, and especially with colts, if they're maybe acting very studdish or just acting up quite a bit and maybe giving you that look in their eye, like I want to hurt you or something, that if that horse shows me that same mentality 2-3 times in a row, well, then yeah, I am concerned. But if it was just one time and then I came back and looked at him 2 more times and he was fine,
Okay.
I'll forgive him for the one.
So the moment of truth is when the horse goes into the ring and is ready to sell. A couple of things there. The consignor probably will have put a reserve on the horse. They don't always do that. So maybe we could talk about what the reserve process is, but also, are you concerned that as you're, I mean, you're from a horse racing family, your name's well known. Are people going to be poaching your bids without doing the work just because they think you're pretty good at this? And is secrecy important? I've heard some people say that it is. So maybe those two things.
Yeah, look, in terms of what you just said at the end there, I don't think I'm as accomplished yet as that people would just be trying to follow me and see who I'm bidding on. That may happen to some agents that have bought many graded stakes winners or have been in the game a very long time and are recognized as some of the the best people at this job. I'd like to think maybe one day, but I don't think at this point in time yet that's I'm somebody who's being targeted at. And then in relation to the reserves and consignor side of the coin, a lot of this is about relationship building as well. I mean, the horses are what kind of bring us all to the sale, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of personal relationships and a major people element to the sale as well. And I think there's growing pains for anybody who's young in the business and that doesn't have those relationships yet, or maybe people don't know who you are yet, or anything like that. And sure, there's situations where maybe a consignor will have a reserve that's very high because they think someone specific is on the horse that won't know that the reserve is that high. But I think as time goes on and you buy horses from plenty different consignors, you kind of make mental notes on how things went, and sometimes the only way to learn is by making mistakes. But over time, you begin to know who, the people that you can trust are and the people that, will give you an honest answer are. Another thing that, I think happens over time is that even though the bid spotters are very, very good at what they do in terms of making it sound like there could be live bids on a horse, that the untrained ear won't pick up. I think I've gotten to the point as well where I have a very good feel for this money feels live versus this just feels like the bid spotters are putting in bids, beneath the reserve. But that's something that comes over time as well, and that wouldn't be easy to pick up on right away. And look, if you have a good enough relationship with the consignor as well, there are times when you can just flat out ask them, hey, what is the reserve on this horse? And, if it's somebody you know and trust, you'll believe them. And I also don't mind at times buying a horse at reserve if I feel like the reserve is a fair price. I think if anything, it's a little dangerous and sometimes, not 100% professional. If you're going to ask a consignor a reserve, they're going to tell you that reserve, it sounds like a fair number. And then you let the horse RNA. It's not always going to work out that you walk back to that consignor and say, hey, I'd like to offer you less. And they're going to be so thrilled that you let their horse go through the ring and not sell. So if the reserve is very high, of course, not going to just be the only bid at the reserve. But if the reserve is fair and I really like the horse, I think it's completely fine to be buying a horse at the reserve.
I guess it's good information to have the reserve because, for example, if the reserve's $99,000 and your budget's 50, then you might be able to take that horse off your list and move on. So it's good information to have, but at times it's tough to get it out of the consignor. So it's just,
and understandably so. It's consignor. A lot of the consignors have owners that they're answering to as well, right? So maybe the consignor thinks this is a $75,000 horse, but the owner of the horse is insisting that you put a 125 on him, and the consignor might not even think I'm going to get that done. So it's something where you try to do as much of the finding out as you can. And again, a lot of it's relationship based. But I think really, what you have to do is just assign a value you think is fair on the horse. And if the horses are in and around that value, it's something you need to pay attention to. And, even the ones where the reserve, I may get told the reserve is far north of what my budget states, I'm still going to keep an eye on what happens in the ring with that horse, because this is a crazy business where a lot of different things can happen. And sometimes when a horse doesn't sell, maybe they are willing to take far less afterwards. So I always try to follow up on the ones that RNA as well that I like.
I mean, that's a good point. If a horse does RNA, you can walk out to the consignor's location, and at times they're willing to bargain and negotiate, and you could get the horse for 20 or 30% less than the reserve. So so it's good to follow. Just one question on digital sales, Joe. That's something I thought would never work. Fasig Tipton has made it work, and they've been very successful doing it. What is a digital sale, and how does that operate?
Yeah, so I mean, it's the same core concept, right? I think you're taking the element of all the buyers congregating in one place on a sales grounds with all of the physical horses there, and you're putting it online. And I think that great strides have been made, specifically, like you said, by Fasig Tipton, to make it a platform where you can get almost all the information that you would need, that you would normally get on a sales grounds, that, now you're getting online. And then I think it also helps that, the physical location of the horse is provided by the digital sale. So if you do want to go out and see that horse physically, you can. I am still of the belief that this would be much harder to do in a yearling sale format. I think it works very well for horses of racing age. I think it's also a perk to a lot of the sellers and sometimes the buyers that, a horse is not going to leave the barn that they're stabled in at that racetrack. That horse is going to stay there. And you're not going to change the horse's environment. Whereas, some of these horses of racing age sales where the horse has to physically ship, from New York to Kentucky, so to say, that's cost for the seller. And that also disrupts the horse's training pattern to go to the sale. So I really like it for the racehorses. Look, all of the different speed figures we, analyze and look at are readily available, on the sales platform. And the only piece that's missing is, everybody being able to fill out a card and pull the horse out of a stall. But the location is provided, and if you want to go see that horse, you can. So it's something where I think that's why you've seen the rise of success in the horses of racing age aspect of it. It's a bit harder as a yearling because there's only so much information that can be provided online. But I think Fasig specifically has shown that they're excelling at selling horses very well in these digital sales, and I think it's something that's here to stay without a shadow of a doubt.
I'd also be confident buying a mare that way as well. And what I would like would be that the mare in foal does not have to go through the stress of going through the sales, and just as you said, just stays at the host's farm location. Right. And I think it's good that way. I just noticed before we got on the podcast that the July digital sales catalog is now up as of this morning. So that's something I'm going to be taking a look at to see what horses are lined up for that sale. We could go on the sales process for a long time, and it's very interesting to me, and I hope to everyone else who's listening as well. But we should switch to the 3-year-old colt picture. The big issue this week has been, where is Fierceness going to run? Is he going to run in the Haskell, or is he going to hold off a week for the Jim Dandy? As of airtime, if you will, it looked like the Jim Dandy was going to be where he was going to end up, and his stablemate Mindframe was going to be in New Jersey for the Haskell. Do you know anything different about that, Joe?
I don't have any specific information that would be in the know on their intentions with Fierceness, but excited to see him in whichever race he does decide to compete. Did I hear something similar about Dornoch just because he had drawn the rail in the Haskell that they may, take a look at the Jim Dandy with him as well? Not
Yeah,
sure.
that sounded crazy to me because don't you want the rail at speed favoring Monmouth?
It can
So
be debated. It can be debated because, especially from a rider's perspective, right? If he breaks, then yes, it's a good position to be in. But I think when you draw the rail with a speed horse, you take away that margin for error with the break, with the start. Where if you are drawing the rail with a speed horse at any track in any race, and if you don't break well, that's going to make the assignment for the rider of getting that horse forward and up into the race much more difficult. And that the other riders, if they have done their homework properly, know that, hey, a key speed horse has drawn the rail, and when I break, I'm taking a peek to my inside real quick. And if he's not there, I'm coming over. So it makes the assignment for the rider, if anything, tricky. So it'll be interesting to see where both those key big 3-year-olds, end up.
I haven't seen anything new on Dornoch, so I'm guessing that he's going to stay at the Haskell and that will have mind frame in the Haskell, but that will have fierceness in the Jim Dandy. The Jim Dandy looks like it could be one of the best renditions in a long time, because if we got fierceness, the question which fierceness shows up, we'd have Sierra Leone, who always seems to run well and has a little bit of bad luck. We'd also have Seize the Gray for Lucas in there. That could be a really exciting race. Today, we get a new shooter in the Curlin, a horse by the name of Unmatched Wisdom for Chad Brown. He looks very exciting. What do you know about him, Joe?
So my hot take was to come on here and tell you, John, that I think Unmatched Wisdom is going to show himself to be, one of the leading 3-year-olds in this class, if not the best 3-year-old in this class. I've seen this horse train several times down at Belmont Park. Spent a lot of mornings out there, and I've watched him work. I've watched him even just gallop, and he is a wildly impressive individual that I think he's evidenced in his 2 runs that he has an immense amount of talent. And I think, I may be very wrong in just 3 or 4 hours here. The Curlin's the 3rd race today, but I think you're going to see him dominate the Curlin today. And I think he's going to vault himself right up towards the top of everybody's list in terms of a potential colt that in the back half of the 3-year-old year could make quite a bit of noise. Yeah. I've been so impressed by him in the mornings that if there was future book wagering on the Travers, that's who I would have been lumping on, even 3-4 weeks ago. So I think that Unmatched Wisdom is going to really burst onto the scene today in just a few hours here. And yes, we have some, very exciting races in the Haskell and the Jim Dandy coming up in the near future as well. But for me, Unmatched Wisdom is one to keep an eye on, and I think will be certainly validating, my opinion of what I've seen from him in the mornings on the racetrack.
I'll get on my Naira Bets account and hope that.
I don't think we're going to get much of a price today, but
even money? Do we get even money, or
I don't think so. I think we'll be shorter than that. Yeah.
Just one last thing about fierceness. Todd Pletcher has said that regardless of whether he goes in the Haskell or the Jim Dandy, he'll then go to the Pennsylvania Derby after that, rather than the Travers, and that could change, I guess. But that struck me as a lack of confidence in the horse, not to run in the Travers. Any take on that, Joe?
Look, I think Todd has shown himself to be a true master with 3-year-olds and campaigning them. And, I can only assume. I don't have any. I'm not a part of the inner circles there, in that barn or with that team. But look, it's a team between Mike Rapoli and his group, and then also Todd, and they've more than proven themselves over the year with how successful they've been. And if Todd is saying that that's the plan, I'm sure it's the right one. If I had to guess, maybe they're not 100% confident that he wants to go 1.25 miles. Maybe just would prefer a slightly shorter distance than the 1.25 miles. But it is interesting. I mean, it's the other piece of this is that they have a horse in mind frame that is extremely talented in his own right, and one that could be their charge for the Travers instead of Fierceness.
Well, finally, just a couple questions. Should we assume that you're going on a limb with Unmatched Wisdom, and that's your pick for the Eclipse Award for 3-year-old colts, or is that too much to say?
It's a little tough because you have to build a resume, right? And maybe it's a situation where by the end of the year, in our minds, talent-wise, this is the best horse. But did he do enough to win the award at the end of the year? And I think those are two different things, right?
Right.
You could be the most talented horse, but you just didn't put enough wins on the resume to win the honor at the end of the year. That being said, we had 3 different winners of each Triple Crown race, so it is somewhat there for the taking. I think if the year ended today, you have to give it to Mystic Dan, was the Derby winner, but from the reports we're seeing that he might not be so active in the back half of the year. May come back and run, may not. So it is kind of there for the taking for a new horse or one of these other horses that has already done some things to add to their resume to try and give themselves the best shot at winning the Eclipse Award. I've always felt like the voting as well on these things is sometimes far different than my opinion. So for me, it's very hard to say, I think this horse wins the Eclipse Award, but I can say that I think that Unmatched Wisdom is a horse who could be in the discussion if everything goes right for him in the back half of the year. But you also have a horse like Sierra Leone where, if he was to start knocking out some of these big ones instead of, very, very close in the Kentucky Derby, a bit far back in the Belmont and maybe arguably a touch unlucky, if he was to win the Travers and if any of them are to win a Breeders' Cup race, that certainly vaults them up the leaderboard in terms of winning an Eclipse Award. So there's many candidates for it right now. It's a deep group of 3-year-olds and an exciting one. So I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about as we continue on to the second half of the year.
I'll say Mind Frame as my pick. Not that anyone's following me for my picks, but Mind Frame for the Eclipse Award. I think he wins the Haskell and certainly has a tremendous chance in the Travers when that comes up. Final question, Joe. You're from a horse racing family. As you were growing up, was it always going to be horse racing, or did you want to be an accountant or a priest at some point, or was it always going to be being a bloodstock agent or in some capacity in horse racing?
Well, my father-in-law is an accountant, and
Okay.
I did go to Catholic school throughout my childhood. But no, those were never the professions that really piqued my interest. I can confidently say yes, it was always going to be the racetrack. And it was even so much to the point that I didn't want to go to college. I wanted to go straight to the racetrack. And my parents swiftly let me know that would not be the case.
Okay.
But as soon as I got my 4-year degree, I quickly, spun that into traveling abroad to work with horses. I worked with horses in Ireland at the Irish National Stud and then Australia after that. And kind of got that international experience. But look, when I was very young, there were jockey dreams. But then by about 14, I was 6 foot tall. So the jockey dream died fairly swiftly. And the focus kind of shifted to, well, what part of the industry, is the most interesting to me? And it was, being able to shadow a few notable bloodstock agents at sales, when I was younger, in my later teenage years, in my early 20s, that really kind of drew me to the sales and sourcing what the next, great horses may be was something that captivated me entirely. And I never had any dreams of doing anything other than being at either a horse sale or at the racetrack. And that's how it's all gone to this point. So,
right. Well, interesting. Joe, we kept you longer than we said, but it's been very interesting. And thanks so much for coming on. And I guess you're up in Saratoga tonight or tomorrow morning. And
yeah,
so,
I'll be driving up there tonight. Kind of splitting my time this year. Me and my wife now have 2 children under the age of 2, so we didn't want to haul the whole family up to Saratoga for the summer, and I'll kind of be up there on a as needed basis. But a lot of driving up and down the Taconic never really bothered me, and I will be in Saratoga all weekend. We have 3 runners with Adelphi this weekend, starting today, actually, with a filly called Splashy. But then an exciting horse that has had a lot of seconds so far is still a maiden for tomorrow called He Has It All, that I think is going to show quite a bit in his first run sprinting on the grass. And then on Sunday, we have a horse that's coming into the race on a 2-race winning streak, a New York bred called Better Lucky Than Good, that I actually bought very affordably at the Timonium 2-year-old sale a couple years back. And he's looking to make it 3 in a row on Sunday. So could be a fun weekend for the partners. I think we have some live shots, and excited to get up there later tonight.
Well, we'll follow those with a lot of interest. And again, thank you very much, and hope to see you, if not at the track, then at the sales.
Absolutely, John. Sounds good.
Thanks. Bye-bye.